Welcome to episode 10 of Halloween Babies Podcast. I am your host, Billy D, coming at you from Richmond, Virginia. And today's episode is focusing on the 2020 release, Hunter x Hunter by Shawn Linden. I enjoyed this film so much, I wanted to do a little bit of a director spotlight and go back and review Shawn Linden's previous two films and give a little background on his career. So let's get to it, shall we? Shawn Linden grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and went to university in Canada. And while there, he studied a little bit of philosophy to help hone his writing skills and started writing screenplays. After school, he got into the local film industry, working in the art department as a set decorator and props person. While still writing, he sold his first script at 22, and that's a little bit of an interesting story. I believe he entered a script in a contest and won the contest, which then caught the eye of a few people who wanted to buy the screenplay, which he used as leverage to get himself an agent, and his career was born. When he decided to direct, he just dove right in. He had never directed any short films, and through friends and coworkers in the industry, he raised money to produce his first feature film for a few tens of thousands of dollars. I couldn't find the exact number, but I'm guessing around $20,000 to $30,000. And that film is 2007's Nobody. Nobody is listed as a crime, horror, mystery, sci-fi film starring Costas Mandylor and Edo Ross. It has a runtime of 88 minutes. The synopsis is a nameless assassin is hunted down through the dark streets of an empty city, pursued by the mysterious man he had just killed. And the tagline is, "Nobody is doing this."
When a man stares into the mirror, what is it that stares back? An image of himself. At least all signs point to it. The mouth pronounces the same words. The eyes follow the movements of their master.
So Shawn Linden's feature film debut is an ambitious noir enigma that's full of dark and beautiful images and perspective changes, but the story just left me scratching my head and unfulfilled. Costas Mandylor chases after his doppelganger and holds a pistol to Edo Ross's head while he makes several phone calls, and a blindfolded mystical priestess rolls bones, spits riddles, and unlocks gates in dirty alleyways. A bunch of gangsters talk smack while hanging out on a boat in a frozen lake and dig holes in the ice to throw people in. There's also a mysterious package that seems like it should hold someone's head, but we never see what's inside. Everything is repeated, and then it ends. I enjoyed some of the production aspects and the dark, moody atmosphere of Nobody, but overall, I was kind of bored with this. I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and I admire the ambition, but, this is Shawn figuring things out, in my opinion. So if you like dark noir thrillers that are a little bit weird and Costas Mandylor, you could check this one out. I believe it's on Tubi. So fortunately, Nobody had enough success to allow Shawn to start circulating his scripts, and that led to the production of his second feature film, 2012's The Good Lie. It's listed as a thriller starring Thomas Dekker, Matt Craven, Kyle Switzer, Jesse Rath, and Alex Weiner. It is 92 minutes long.
Today I need to find Kaylin Rose. After you, I've got nowhere else to go. So please.
In this world, there are two kinds of people. Those with guns and those who dig. You dig.
How about you, Franco? You got a good story?
Yeah, I got a good story.
And with The Good Lie, Shawn Linden takes inspiration from 1988's The Vanishing, one of his favorite films, and mixes in elements of a campfire urban legend anthology to tell the story of a young man who finds out he is the product of a violent rape after his mother dies tragically in an automobile accident. Some may find the anthology elements a bit out of place that cause a tonal shift, but I felt they added a bit of levity to the serious nature of the story, while juxtaposing the turmoil our young lead is experiencing with the youthful camaraderie and playfulness of his friends. A solid low-budget mystery thriller that builds tension nicely, and although you can see the reveal coming, it ends on a high note. I gave The Good Lie a 3.5 out of 5, and it is on Tubi. So that brings us to Hunter x Hunter, released December 18th, 2020. It's listed as a drama, horror, mystery thriller. It is 93 minutes long. Of course, it was written and directed by Shawn Linden, filmed in Manitoba and Alberta, Canada. Starring Camille Sullivan, Summer H. Howell, Devon Sawa, Nick Stahl, Gabriel Daniels, and Lauren Cochran.
This is a hard life. You chose it and it suits you. I chose it when I chose you. Renee never had a choice.
What do you do if you see something?
Don't run. The wolf is back. Ate a raccoon and left the paw.
This isn't a normal wolf.
It's just a hungry wolf looking for an easy meal. I will catch it.
What is that?
It's a ring.
The wolf ate a ring?
Maybe it was attached to something that tasted good.
What, like a finger?
Where did she say she found this?
Out in the woods.
Hello?
Jesus.
There's a killer out there.
My advice is to move your family to the woods.
Get behind me!
What if we can't make it out before the freeze?
We don't run from our troubles.
You heard it, right?
We don't get a lot of people out here.
That's what makes it so special.
Nothing pushes us out of our home.
I'm worried about Dad.
Renee says she heard a gunshot.
Got a blood trail.
Your husband wanted to catch a wolf. Is that what he told you?
Stay in this room until I come get you. Say you understand! I understand!
You want to snag a wolf? You gotta outwolf him.
The film opens with a father, Joseph, and his preteen daughter, Renee, setting animal traps in the forest and nearby river. The family dog, Tova, is with them as Joseph takes notes and finds one of their traps broken. He radios to his wife, Anne, who was at their cabin preparing to take their animal furs into town to trade. Joseph tells Anne to pick up a griffin leaf spring when she goes into town. The family lives deep enough in the forest that Anne has to use a makeshift sled to haul all the furs to their truck. Joseph finds a trap with only a paw caught in it. The carcass has been ripped away. Renee asks, "Where's the rest?" Thinks about it and then says, "It's back." The title card drops. Anne gets to town and finds out that furs are selling for half of what they used to, and she won't have enough money for food and the leaf spring. She decides on the leaf spring and daydreams about living in a real house. She sees advertisements for houses for sale closer to town. While leaving the general store, Anne sees a mother walking her kids to the school bus stop and has a sad look in her eyes. Later that day, Anne is on the porch mending clothes when Joseph, Renee, and Tova return. Anne goes inside and starts preparing food as Joseph teaches Renee how to skin the animals they just caught. Joseph tells Renee Every animal in the forest has enough brains to tan its own hide except one. Renee replies, a moose.
Side note.
And apparently you can apply brain oil to a hide, let it soak for 24 hours, then stretch it and soften the hide with a stick and smoke it over a small fire. We see Joseph doing this, and I found it interesting that the setup for smoking the hide makes it look like a wolf howling up at the moon. Cut to night, and Joseph is at the table with Renee as he tries to fix the broken trap. Anne is bringing everyone their food as she talks about how times are tough and expenses are rising while income is decreasing. As they start to eat, Renee says, "The wolf is back." Anne is upset that Joseph didn't tell her and sends Renee to her bedroom so Anne can chew Joseph out. Apparently they've had trouble with this wolf before, and Anne fears not only for their safety, but that the wolf will steal their food supply and source of income. Anne suggests they notify the Fish and Wildlife Services, but Joseph gets upset and offended by her suggesting he can't protect the family. Joseph says, "We don't run from our troubles. We bring our problems to them, they bring their problems to us." Anne says she has good reason to be worried about the wolf, but that Joseph is scared of people. Joseph says, enough. I'll catch the wolf. Anne says it's not just about the wolf, and she questions the validity of their lifestyle and suggests they buy a house in town, but Joseph just blows her off. Later that night, Renee is reading a book out loud and asks her mother what rampant means. Anne says she's not sure, sees Joseph sulking outside, and tells Renee to go to bed.
Side note.
Renee was reading The Call of the Wild by Jack London, and rampant, the two definitions, A, rearing upon the hind legs with forelegs extended, and B, marked by a menacing wildness, extravagance, or absence of restraint. Anne and Joseph are on the porch having a conversation. Anne says, "This is a hard life." Joseph responds, "Life is hard everywhere." Anne replies, "This is harder. You chose it, and it suits you. I chose it when I chose you, and it suits me. Renee never had a choice. She should be in school. She should be worried about math and boys, not wolves." Joseph says she's not scared of a wolf. You are. The two go inside and sit on the edge of their bed in darkness and embrace. The screen goes black. Ominous music swells as we cut to the early morning before the sun is present, and Renee wakes up to see her father going to their shed to stock up on traps to try and catch the wolf. As he leaves the shed, Renee is standing there ready to go with him. At first, Joseph tells her she can't go, but then he relents and says she can help bait traps, but if they find any fresh tracks, she has to take the same path home, no questions. And Tova can't go. Later that morning, Anne wakes up, sees that Joseph and Renee are gone, and radios Joseph to check on them. He tells her what they are doing and that he will send Renee home at the first sign of danger. Plus, she has the .22 rifle. Side note, the rifle is at least a .30 caliber, so either that's an error or there is some other reason they are referring to it as a .22. While teaching Renee how to set traps, Joseph notices something suspicious and sends Renee home. We now cut to a wonderfully edited scene that goes back and forth between Joseph tracking the wolf, Anne getting water from the river, and Renee playfully walking back home. As Joseph is getting closer to the wolf, waves of fear start to overtake Anne and Renee. Anne ends up spilling all her water as she runs back home, and Renee has a small panic attack. Joseph finds the wolf, takes aim, and as he fires, he sees a human forearm in the mouth of the wolf, distracting him enough to miss the wolf, and the wolf runs off. But now Joseph is concerned about this arm and goes deeper into the forest, coming upon a service road that he crosses and first finds a blood trail and then markings on the trees that denote another trail. Using the scope on his rifle, Joseph sees what looks like a lawn chair and a woman tied to a tree. He calls out but gets no response. As he gets closer, we see it is a clearing with at least 5 dead female bodies in various stages of decomposition. Joseph kneels down next to the chair as he realizes it's not a wolf that he should be worried about. Later that night at dinner, Joseph isn't eating and pours himself a drink and rolls cigarettes while deep in contemplation. It's obvious he has not told his family what he has found. He goes out to the shed and grabs the 2 biggest traps he has, big enough to trap a person, and tests out their strength by triggering one with a large log. Later that night in bed, Anne tries to ease his worrisome mind, telling him he'll catch the wolf tomorrow. The next morning, Anne wakes up and sees that Joseph is gone. She radios him and we see he is back at the death clearing, contemplating what to do, and tells her he'll be out all night. But don't worry, stay close to home and carry a rifle just in case if she has to go out. Joseph then starts setting traps. We cut to later in the day, and Anne and Renee are down at the river washing clothes and skipping stones. Renee notices Tova is gone and hears him bark in the distance. She goes to look for him, but a wolf creeps out, and Anne pushes Renee behind her as they back up to the rocks at the edge of the water. Side note. So some might think the wolf looks strange in this scene, but what they had to do in order to film it was film the actors reacting to the wolf, and then went to another location where they filmed the wolf and then composited the 2 shots together. So that's why it looks a little bit odd, but I think it adds a bit of uncanniness in a good way. Anyway, as Anne has to put herself in front of Renee, she screams and bares her teeth, scaring the wolf enough to allow her to grab the rifle and fire off a shot. So Anne and Renee run back to the house. Renee starts freaking out about Tova being out there, and Anne tells her to stay as she ventures out in search of Tova. But of course, Tova is dead. We see a bit of fur at the bottom of the screen as Anne places her hand on Tova and is sad. R.I.P. Tova. Later that night, Renee is in bed, worried about Tova. Anne obviously has not told her he is dead and instead says they will find him tomorrow. Renee says she is also worried about her father. Anne says, "I know he's stronger than any animal in the forest. He's not afraid of a wolf, and neither are we." Renee says, "I hope he gets him while we're sleeping." The next morning, Anne tries to radio Joseph and gets no response. We see Anne standing guard in front of the outhouse where Renee is using it. We see them inside eating, and it appears they are down to mostly potatoes. Anne says they need to find more food, so they head out to search the traps, and Anne stops Renee from heading off in the direction of Tova's body. They find another one of their traps has been raided by a wolf and find wolf feces that contains a ring from a human hand. Anne does not seem happy. About to get real, girl. Anne says that they are going to the truck. We cut away to town as we are introduced to 2 Municipal Conservation Department officers, Lucy and Danny. These characters are apparently our break in the tension as they banter while Lucy takes calls and Danny goes out on a job to check on a bear shot at someone's residence. Lock up your trash, everyone who lives near bears. This is where Danny tells us the definition of habituated. It's when an animal loses its natural aversion to humans. On the way back to town, Danny makes a mental note about an abandoned car on the side of the road When he gets back to his office, he finds Anne is talking with Lucy about the wolf and her missing husband. Both officers seem to be confused about Anne and the family living where they do because it's federal land. Anne says the land has been in Joseph's family for 3 generations. Well, not according to the Line Management Act, Danny says. If we file a missing persons report, there's going to be questions about your living arrangements. And then mentions her little boy out in the truck, which might be a reference to earlier drafts of the screenplay when Renee was written as a boy. The officers tell Anne there is nothing they can do. 36 hours is not considered a long time to be out hunting, and the wolf is where the wolf is supposed to be, implying her family is not. Danny says, I don't know what we can do for you. Anne says, do you have any food? Cut to Renee eating a sandwich in the truck as Anne drives them back home. When they get there, Anne sends Renee inside to start her lessons as Anne goes off to bury Tova. We see his little paws sticking out of the grave as she covers him up.
You were a good boy, Tova.
Anne hears movement around her and cocks the rifle. We cut to Renee at home, and she runs to the window as she hears 2 gunshots. Anne returns home with a baby deer. She says she shot it by accident, but since they have it, they should eat it. Anne looks to Renee and asks if she'll show her how to skin it. Renee walks her mother through the process of skinning the deer, and we get some realistic-looking gore. Not a lot, but just enough, and then the camera cuts to the 2 of them eating at the table. Renee does not seem happy about having to eat that baby. We cut to later in the evening when Anne is starting to inspect the trap from the beginning of the film. She hears static and a garbled voice come over the radio for a few seconds. She responds back calling out to Joseph, but gets no response. We then see Anne lying in bed with the walkie-talkie. We fade to black and then hear, Mom, wake up. Tova's back. Anne goes outside with the rifle, knowing it's not Tova, and hears moaning in the distance. Suspecting it is Joseph, she runs out only to find a strange man laying on the ground with blood on his hands. Anne runs back to the house and tells Renee to stay in her room, then grabs her sled and heads off and brings the man back into the house and checks on his wounds. His bone is sticking out of his leg. He seems to be delirious, and the only item he has on him besides his clothes is a Walkman with headphones. Renee looks on through her slightly open bedroom door. The screen goes black. The next morning, Anne and Renee are sleeping in the bed together when Renee wakes up and goes to investigate the stranger. She listens to his Walkman for a minute and then gets closer to him as he opens his eyes asking for water. Renee runs back and wakes up her mother, who brings the man water and explains to Renee he has no identification. Then explains what identification is. Then explains how the man is hurt, and even though her father says we're not supposed to trust strangers, this man needs help, and that's what you do. Help. Anne injects the stranger with medicine and stitches up his leg. We now cut to Danny as he cleans up roadkill and goes back to the office where Lucy tells him there was another bear sighting at the residence he visited earlier, and he jokes with Lucy before heading out again. After checking on the bear incident, Denny heads back to the office and stops at the abandoned car and writes down the license plate number. We cut to Anne and Renee, who are eating at the table when the stranger wakes up and asks where he is. He doesn't remember the previous night. The stranger says he was attacked. Anne assumes it was by the wolf and that something scared it off before it could finish him, hopeful that it was her husband. The stranger asks about her husband. She says his name is Joseph. I'm Anne. This is Renee. The stranger introduces himself as Lou. And in French, Lou means wolf, spelled L-O-U-P, but the P is silent. So that's a bit of a giveaway. Anne gives Lou some food and asks what he's doing out there. Lou says he's a photographer and was heading up to the falls when his car broke down and he started walking. It got cold and dark. He heard a sound and then blacked out. Anne tries to convince Lou that he needs to go to the hospital, but he seems apprehensive, saying it doesn't seem safe with the wolf being out there and him barely able to move. Anne and Renee attempt to transport Lou on their sled, but he cries out in pain and they stop. They carry Lou into Joseph and Anne's room and put him to bed. Anne tells Renee to gather up the traps and see what you can find, any kind of weapons. We need to start thinking like your dad. Anne and Renee venture out into the forest and set up all manner of traps, even using poison. They set up a fire outside the house in hopes of scaring off the wolf. Cut to Danny at his office calling in the plates for the abandoned car and contemplating over the ring Anne gave him when she came for help. Lucy asks him where he thinks the ring came from. Danny is looking at missing persons posters and says maybe it was attached to something that tasted good. Danny heads back out to check on the abandoned car yet again. At the car, Danny starts walking to the forest where he notices the markings on the trees and follows the trail. He comes upon the clearing with the dead and decomposing bodies and attempts to radio back to Lucy, but he is out of range. He then steps on one of the large traps Joseph set, and as he screams and tries to get up, his left arm gets caught in another trap. Fade to black. We cut to night, and Anne is standing guard by the fire with a rifle. She goes inside and starts trying to fix the broken trap from the beginning of the film. She hears Lou moaning in his sleep in the bedroom. We cut to the Municipal Conservation Office early the next morning. Lucy is entering the office and hears Danny's wife leaving a message on the phone looking for Danny because he did not come home. Lucy gets worried, grabs her keys, and consults the map before heading out to find him. We then cut to Anne heading out to check on their traps, and she finds a rabbit. She cradles the rabbit in her arms, and we hear its neck snap as it lets out a squeak. Anne starts crying. She then takes out her walkie-talkie and tries to contact Joseph. She hears his radio beep off in the distance and finds Joseph's dead body. It appears as if he had been dragging Lou on a makeshift sled, but was hit in the head and killed. Anne puts two and two together and rushes off back to the cabin. Cut to Lucy arriving at the road where Danny's truck is parked by Lou's car, and she starts calling out for him. Danny is too weak to scream out, so he fires his gun off instead. Lucy follows the sounds to him and tells him she will go get help. Cut to Anne arriving at the cabin as she discreetly tries to wake up Renee, but Lou attacks and disarms her and chokes her until she passes out. Renee screaming for her mother as we cut to rescue services arriving to help Danny. We cut back to the cabin where Lou is injecting himself with medicine and combing his hair, looking like a real creep. Anne is on the floor with a bloody face and she starts to wake up. Lou says he needs the keys to her truck so he can get to his car before somebody finds it. Anne is coughing and wheezing and asking for Renee. Lou says, "Give me the keys first." She points to the trim above the front door and Lou grabs the keys. Anne asks for Renee again. Lou says, "I wasn't looking for any of this. If it were up to me, we never would have crossed paths. But your husband wanted to catch a wolf. Is that what he told you?" Lou then grabs his Walkman and puts on the headphones. We cut to Lucy at the clearing as medics tend to Danny, and Lucy says, "I want to know who did this." Another officer says, "We've got a blood trail." Cut to Lou limping outside the cabin carrying gas cans as he douses a pile of clothes in the fire pit. Attempting to destroy evidence of his actions, he goes into the cabin and grabs the bed sheets as Anne coughs and reaches for the trap from the beginning of the film. Lou lights the fire and goes back into the cabin. Lou starts dancing over Anne, pounding his chest, screaming, "Look at me, look at me." Lou starts to strip Anne, but she finally gets a hold of the trap and swings it at Lou's face, clamping down on his jaw, giving him the appearance of a snout. And he screams as Anne hits him in the head with a frying pan and knocks him out. Anne opens the bedroom door, and we see the pain and horror on her face as she sees what Lou has done to Renee. The audience is left to their imagination on this one. But then we see something come over Anne, as if she has an idea. We cut to the officers in the forest as they see the smoke from the fire and head towards the cabin. We cut to Anne as she drags Lou out to the shed, and she grabs his Walkman, puts on the headphones, and presses play. The song Hypnotized Narcissist by the experimental dark noise rock band Tales of Murder and Dust starts playing as Anne strings Lou up and puts on an apron. Lou comes to as Anne is sharpening a knife. The officers are running through the forest, guns drawn. Anne removes Lou's sweater and cuts him across the chest. She sharpens the knife some more and then starts slicing flesh off his arm. The vocals to the song kick in and we hear, "Your reflection in the lake disappears in time." Anne slices the flesh off of Lou's chest and throws it in a bucket. The officers are closing in. We hear the lyrics, "No one will ever know of the dead fire in you." The officers have arrived at the cabin and start to search the area. Anne has cut Lou by his left ear and digs her fingers into the flap of flesh and screams as she looks into his eyes and rips his face off. We hear the lyrics, "You'll get lost inside the noise." The officers hear screaming coming from the shed. Anne opens the shed door. She is covered in blood and holds Lou's face in her hand and throws it at the feet of one of the officers. Anne's eyes are wide open. She is in a trance-like state as she walks past the officers and barking dogs. One of the officers enters the shed, and we get a look at Lou, minus his flesh, one eye wide open in shock. Anne looks at Lucy as she walks past her. We see Lou once again as the muscles of his arms glisten where there used to be flesh, and his face is taking on a skeletal appearance, revealing the monster beneath. Anne walks to the front porch, sits down, and presses stop. Cut to black as we hear the peaceful sounds of the forest. Birds are chirping, and the wind blows through the trees. So I've seen Hunter x Hunter 4 times now, and that ending is still as powerful on the 4th time as it was the first time. The movie is just a slow build of tension throughout. We get a little bit of levity with the municipal conservation department, and then the end is just brutal. It wasn't until my last viewing where I picked up on the idea of Anne revealing the true identity of Lou as a hideous monster, and it made me think of the ending of a more lighthearted film, The Princess Bride, when Wesley challenges Prince Humperdinck to a duel to the pain, essentially cutting off his feet, hands, nose, tongue, and eyes, and says, "Your ears you keep, so that every shriek of every child shall be yours to cherish. Every babe that weeps in fear at your approach, every woman that cries, 'Dear God, what is that thing?' will reverberate forever with your perfect ears." So now that I've kind of ran through all of that, I've got a few little tidbits of trivia. So the screenplay for Hunter x Hunter was written in 2007, and that gave Shawn Linden quite a bit of time to think about how he wanted to create this film. And he actually let the special effects coordinator, Jason Wilkins, read the script in 2007. So he had quite a bit of time to figure out how he was going to pull off the animal props and the prosthetics, and he did an amazing job. Also a shout out to the composer Kevin Cronin, who did a great job. His score does a lot of heavy lifting. With a film with such little dialogue, it helps carry the tone and tension right along. Shawn Linden said that he looked to the movie The Revenant as inspiration behind wanting to show the inhospitable elements of nature. And I think he succeeded. So, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of this movie. It's definitely a 4 out of 5 for me, creeping up to a 4.5 out of 5. And I kind of wanted to do this episode and just show the progression of a director and writer, and how he started off with one film, just kind of figuring out how he was going to do this. Granted, the first film's not my bag, but there was enjoyable things about it. Moved on to the next film, got a little bit better, and Hunter x Hunter, I think it's amazing. I don't know what he is up to. I haven't been able to find anything about any future projects of him, but hopefully, if he's got something coming out and he follows with this progression, this next one just might be a masterpiece. So fingers crossed on that. That being said, that brings the episode to an end, episode 10. And I'm super excited that I've gotten this far. Never thought I would have made it. And thank you all for being out there and listening. And, I would really like to hear from you. I've got a Halloween Babies Podcast email account at halloweenbabiespodcast@gmail.com. And I have not received any emails except from the lovely ladies at Nobody's Podcast. And it was great being on episode 17 of their show. But, help me fill up my my email a little bit. So maybe send me a little message if you got some time. Let me know what you think of the podcast, or the things that you like about it, things you don't like about it. Let me know what you think of the intro and outro song that I composed. Do you like one better? Do you think they fit? Let me know your opinions on that. I know that's a dangerous thing to say in these days, but just, let your thoughts fly. And if you do like the music, the intro and outro, you can go over to Halloween Babies Podcast on YouTube, and I've got about 60 or so little short videos that I've done, and I've done little compositions for each of those. So maybe we can get the numbers up on those views. Other than that, you can find Halloween Babies Podcast on Instagram. and I post reviews there periodically. And again, thanks for listening, and stay safe and stay scared.